weather is not looking good.
We are cleared for priority routing.
The silence in the cockpit of Flight 492 was heavy enough to feel. Captain Robert Hayes sat at the controls, his hands gripping the yoke with a white-knuckled intensity that betrayed his calm facade. Beside him, First Officer Sarah Miller meticulously double-checked the flight computer, her movements efficient and precise. It was supposed to be a routine mid-morning departure from Chicago O'Hare, just another leg in a career Sarah had spent decades perfecting. She had climbed the ranks through sheer grit, weathering every storm and overcoming every obstacle placed in her path by a profession that often looked the other way. But today, the air in the cabin felt different. Robert was staring out the window at the rain-slicked runway, his jaw tight, his expression cold. He had been a legend at the airline for 20 years, a man whose word was gospel to the dispatchers and whose ego had long ago outgrown the cockpit. He hadn't said a single word to Sarah since she stepped into the seat. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Robert finally turned his head, his eyes scanning Sarah with an open, blatant hostility. He didn't see a colleague or a fellow aviator. He saw an intrusion. He leaned back, his voice dropping into a low, gravelly tone that was meant to intimidate. He told her that he had spent his entire life flying the heavy jets and he had never once had to share his workspace with someone like her. He suggested that if she had any self-respect left, she would gather her things and find a different gate. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face, but she didn't waver. She knew exactly who Robert was and what he represented. He was the type of man who believed that history was written only by people who looked and sounded exactly like him. He had spent years getting away with his behavior because he was the face of the airline, the golden boy who brought the planes in on time and charmed the passengers. He thought he was untouchable. He leaned forward again, his voice rising just enough to be heard over the hum of the aircraft systems. He told her that he was the captain and his authority was absolute. He claimed he didn't care about the new company policies or the shifting landscape of corporate culture. He told her that he was not going to take off with her in the right seat. He made it clear that she was a mistake in his flight plan, a liability that he refused to accept. Sarah looked at the flight computer, her fingers hovering over the buttons as she prepared to initialize the system. She realized then that this wasn't just about a flight to the West Coast. This was a moment of reckoning. She understood the weight of the silence from the flight attendants and the nervous energy coming from the ground crew. They were all waiting to see what would happen next, waiting to see if she would be the one to finally stand up to the man who had been bullying them for as long as anyone could remember. She turned to face him, her voice steady and clear. She reminded him that she was qualified for this aircraft and that she had been assigned this route by the regional director. She told him that she wasn't going anywhere and that the plane would depart on schedule. Robert laughed, a harsh, grating sound that seemed to mock the very idea of professional equality. He told her she was delusional. He said that he had friends on the board of directors who would clear his name before the plane even hit the cruising altitude. He stood up, blocking her path, and used his physical presence to dominate the small, cramped space of the flight deck. He told her that she was nothing more than a temporary fixture, a checkbox that the company had insisted on filling, but that it wouldn't change the reality of who really held the power. He was convinced that he had won. He was convinced that she would eventually fold, just like everyone else had over the last 2 decades. He turned his back on her, reaching for the radio to tell the gate agents that they were facing a delay. He wanted to make sure everyone knew that this was her fault. He wanted to embarrass her in front of the crew and the passengers who were just starting to board. He was relishing the power trip, oblivious to the fact that he was rapidly nearing the end of his career. He didn't know that Sarah wasn't just a first officer. She was a woman who had spent the last year secretly purchasing shares in the company, meticulously documenting every incident of misconduct she encountered on the line. She wasn't just a pilot. She was a majority shareholder and the secret architect of a massive internal restructuring project designed to purge the very toxicity that Robert embodied. He was digging his own grave, and he was doing it with a smile on his face. The cabin was filling up with passengers, unaware of the conflict happening just feet away behind the reinforced cockpit door. Some of them were business travelers, others were families heading home, all of them expecting a safe and professional flight to their destination. Robert continued to hold the microphone, his voice echoing through the cabin as he spoke to the ground crew. He was putting on a performance, painting himself as the victim of a corporate system that had turned against its most loyal servants. He was so caught up in his own legend that he failed to notice the look on the face of the lead flight attendant as she walked past the cockpit. She had heard enough of his tirades over the years. She was tired of the fear, tired of the intimidation, and tired of the way he treated the crew like his personal subordinates. She looked at Sarah, a brief, fleeting glance that spoke volumes. It was a silent plea, a signal that they were all on her side. Sarah took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on the control panel. She knew that the next few minutes would change everything. She pulled out her private mobile device and dialed a number that wasn't listed in any company directory. She didn't have to wait long for an answer. She explained the situation briefly, her tone professional and detached, even as she described the harassment she had endured over the last hour. She told the person on the other end exactly what Robert had said and what he was doing to the operation of the flight. She was calm, calculated, and focused. She knew that the evidence she provided would be more than enough to trigger an immediate, irreversible response from the board. She was the one in control now. She was the one who held the keys to his future.